Hi, everybody. This is Gaurav. I am representing Keshav Suri Foundation on the panel, and I have two amazing guests with me. One is, of course, Faraz Ansari, and then we have Faiza. Just to tell you a little bit about both of them, Faraz is a film director, and they've been known for projects that are personally my favorite, like Sisak, The Big Day, Sheer Korma, and they also recently started this really cool brand called Funkar by Faraz, and I'm just going to read the Instagram bio because I think it is so epic. It says, Funkar by Faraz is an artisanal, sustainable, vintage, gender fluid, upcycled, ethically sourced brand. And I think it can't get cooler than that. And of course, because Faraz is I identified as somebody who's queer, so it's a queer-owned business in that sense. So that's Faraz. And then we have Faiza, who's known as the mother of DJing and has been kind of performing all across the globe in that sense. And and she's one of the busiest and the most successful DJs that I've kind of come across. And lucky enough, we've had the chance of to kind of have her on at Kitty to play a bunch of sets. I'm going to jump into the first question, and you know what? A lot of times when we do, whenever we are sitting in these interviews, this question kind of comes quite late into the conversation. But I think we should kind of start with this question, and that is, how did you sort of come in terms with yourself? Because I remember being a kid and who's queer, it was very difficult to kind of even ask this question to myself most of the times. And now that I'm a lot more comfortable about it, it's easy. But there was a time when it was just so difficult to even sort of have this conversation with myself. So how did you two kind of came in terms with yourselves, your sexuality, your identity, gender, and in general in life also, and your politics? If you could talk about that a little bit.
So I think the Gaurav, I think my journey with myself personally, I've never really. It's very interesting because personally, I never really had a problem with who I am, or with my identity. To be honest, even as early as I think when I was about 4 years old, I think that's when I started being aware of who I am, what I like, in a very innocent sort of way. But I never really questioned myself, like what is wrong with me. It was never that. It was about, wow, that's who I am. And I think the situation started happening with the world outside, externally, when people just feel so out of place when you are really being yourself. I think and they feel out of place because you being yourself. So I think when you go to school, I went to an all boys school, and that's where it started. Like, you're not one of us, that's where it begins. And then I think sort of to carry that forward back home, and to then question yourself, that is there something really wrong with me, or is it just that they don't understand. So I think with me personally, it was more external, to do with the fact that I was made to question myself because of the external parameters around me that made me feel very out of place, very insecure. And I think that still continues. I don't think coming out really is a destination. It's a journey that goes on forever. I think every day is really a coming out day for a queer person. Whether I'm going to the airport to catch a flight, or whether I'm going to get a cup of coffee, it's coming out day. So I think that process never really stops. And I think our journey with ourselves, with our sexual identities, with our gender identities, that itself is an ongoing process. How I felt last year is not exactly how I feel now, because there's been so much of growth that has happened. There's been so much of nurturing that one has to do. There's been so much of self-love that keeps growing. And, I think that also sort of puts you in a very different spot than how you started out with yourself. Um, I mean, I identify as a non-binary person, and I think 2 years back, I had no idea about the fact that I always felt like this is not how I feel, and to find the right term to be able to, to put again another label really on it, to leave a label and to find another label really, it's like it's just too many boxes that we have to keep, unboxing ourselves from. And I think that continues to me, to be, and not just as an individual, but also as a storyteller, as an artist. I think we're all onto journeys that keep on, pushing us to evolve more and more. And I think that is an ongoing process. So um, I have always been at peace with who I am. And it's really funny because when I say this out loud, people are like, how is that possible? But it's true. I was always at peace with who I am. It was to find a way to let others also understand that I am at peace with this is who I am, and I think they need to accept it. So I think the journey of acceptance has been very external in that sense. And I think through that also there is a journey that happens within yourself, wherein you sort of define many things for yourself personally. And I think that continues to grow and that continues to be. So yeah, I think we keep moving forward, and there's no moving on really. It's just moving forward. So I think that's where I am in terms of my sexuality and my gender identity. So yeah.
It's really beautiful that a lot of times when, of course, it's always external, right? Because if we had those sort of examples, and if we had those sort of like you said, representation in the past, which we could look up to as kids, we would have never kind of had those sort of experiences internally or externally, right? But since that is missing, still today, I mean, I don't know how many actual representations of queer stories and how varied and or diverse they actually are. I mean, that's always questionable, but it usually it can break a person down. But I'm so happy that you could kind of sail through it in a way that you did, and here you are with your glasses.
Listen, I just want to
Faraz, you deserve to wear those
They're
glasses.
so cool.
You've been wearing those glasses since 4 years old, and we love you for that.
I just
I'm
want to
telling
say
you,
this
you
one
earned
We
thing.
those.
do.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt this great session where I'm being like lauded, but I just want to just add one little thing. I think the biggest romance that one has in life is with themselves, really, and I think that's where I am. I'm romancing myself and who I am, and I'm absolutely loving it. So yeah, bring on the glasses.
That's really well said. Um,
Is that you wanna
well,
go?
I don't
Do you wanna
know.
go?
Yeah, I don't know what to say after all of that. I mean, I completely resonate with much of that. My experience has been a little bit different in terms of I found it really hard to accept myself, through my childhood because of the universe and the world that I was around, and yeah, it was really hard for me to fit in any way. So I just I just thought, what next? I mean, everything I'm just so out of the box, and I just couldn't really understand it. So I always knew I was different, but I didn't really want to be different. So it was quite challenging for me. I just wanted to fit in, and very soon I realized I couldn't fit in anywhere, not even in you normal children's shoes or clothes, or even in the mindset or in my gender or my sexuality. It was just like, oh my goodness, a spaceship has landed and I am in that spaceship. So for me, it was I would say, quite challenging. Whilst, yes, I definitely accept myself. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know more and more and love more and more about who I am. And the more peace I've grown with myself has definitely given me more strength, of character. But it's definitely been a long journey for me. And my coming out story, I totally agree with what Farah says. I mean, coming out, going to the toilets, coming out, going in security, coming out, you come out every day. I think that's so well said and expressed. But my actual first story, telling my parents and my friends, I mean, as soon as I found out very clearly that I am a lesbian, and this is who I am, and this is what I want to be, and this is what I have to be, and this is my expression of my sexuality that I told my family and my friends, and it was actually quite challenging for me with my parents, and it's been a long journey, and that definitely did affect how I felt about myself, and I wish it could have been different. And I know there are lots of people who are very blessed to have a family that really support them, and there are lots of people who are just made to feel very alone and very, very um, not okay about themselves, who actually suffer because they feel so alone and unloved and misunderstood and not heard and not seen and not cared for. And that's very, very, very challenging. So yeah, of course, the first thing is to accept yourself. And for some people, it's easier, and I think for some people, it's harder. But I think the journey is what brings you to a better place in yourself always. And rightly said, we're always evolving and pushing the boundaries of our own language, like, gender fluid and non-binary. And they were words that 5 years ago, I don't think anyone, you know, could only mention binary in terms of numbers. They're just, fluid when we're talking about water. It's like, so I think as language changes, because as we change and we evolve, then we find more words and more language to describe our emotions and who we are. And it's also a revelation to ourselves, because finally there's another word for it. Like when I was growing up, I knew I'd never get married. I always told my mum, I'm not getting married. And I felt really very clear on that from a very young age, but I didn't have words to articulate, because there wasn't this language of maybe finding a way to articulate to the world. Whilst I hate labels, but we do need to kind of express who we are to the world so that they can even try to understand. It's wonderful having new words which you can relate to, and you can think, oh my goodness, that's me. I can relate to that, whereas before maybe we didn't have those words. So I think language is also really important, to find a language that you can identify with, because sometimes there just aren't words. You just know that it's a sense of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing that. And it's also, I think, like if you could sort of give a message out of this, so that language is also something that can be used um, to also harm people in that sense, right? The same words that we use and we have reclaimed in that sense are words which were deeply, and not are, but were deeply problematic at one point of time. Words like queer, or words like homosexual in that sense. And I think it's just beautiful how we kind of reclaim all of that, and water, which is supposed to be fluid, becomes a representation in that sense of how you feel. And I think it's so powerful in that sense. I'm going to move a little bit ahead from the personal conversation, and would talk a little bit about your work as creators, and would love to know, because Faiza kind of represents the audio space, and Faraz does the video and visual element of storytelling in that sense. If you could talk a little bit about, like, how have you seen the representation of queer narratives or queer people, both in front of the screen, or as the output, as opposed to the input, has sort of changed. And yeah, I mean, if you could kind of just talk about it a little bit.
Cool. I'll go ahead first. So I grew up in the 90s, and in the 90s, watching cinema which was deeply queerphobic and deeply misogynistic. It continues to be so, but I think it was all the more so because I think people were not being held accountable, and I think now people are held accountable for what they sort of put out, the narratives that they support. So I'm glad that has happened now, but I think we still cater to deeply queerphobic, misogynistic, patriarchal narratives. So I think watching that, I always wanted to. Initially, it was really funny because I was like, is this just me in this entire world? Am I the only queer in the village? Am I the only one who likes people of the same sex? That's where I was initially, and then I was in school when Deepa Mehta's Fire released, and I think I read it in the newspapers where they were talking about Shabana Azmi being in love with Nandita Das. I said, oh wait a minute, so there are more people like me, and I remember I bunked school and I went to the theaters to watch Fire. Of course, it was for adults, so we were not really allowed, but we, found a way to get into the projector room and watch the film, some bits of it at least. And I think that really put so much into perspective about, I think, just representation for that matter. I think because we were deprived of it, we never had it, and therefore I think my journey to become a filmmaker, to become a storyteller, more importantly, was to create those representations for generations of queer children to come. And that's been my journey so far, Gaurav. You know that. So I'm getting emotional, but that's been my journey. I want to leave behind a legacy of really powerful, progressive, successful, the queer characters who have a legacy of love and who have a legacy of acceptance and kindness. And that's the narrative we need. We need happy queer adults, in cinema, who are living the lives that they want to, and successfully so. Of course, there will be. It does not take away the struggles that one has to go through. I think that is also a part of where we are and who we are. So never to sort of shove that off the table, but I think to take that forward and to bring in a more progressive narrative in terms of where we see ourselves to be. I think when we talk about aspirational cinema, it's not just about going to Switzerland and singing a song wearing Dolce and Gabbana. I think it's so much more than that. I think it's right now it's just about just seeing two people being very happy. Or I think even the whole idea of a queer person always sort of coming out because of another queer person, I also find that really problematic. Why can't a person just come out because they want to come out? Why do we have need this anchor, this motivation of love to be able to come out? Why can't we just come out because we want to come out, right? And I feel that is a narrative that I really want to also sort of to bring out. And in the mainstream, I think it's very essential to talk about this word mainstream. I hate it, but and therefore I use universal. So I think a more universal narrative, a more universal approach where you bring people together, people who are not just a queer, but people who are on the other side of the spectrum, bring them under the same roof and talk to them about who we are. And just I think allow them a chance to see us, for who we really are and how we love. And I think that is true inclusion. And I think we still have miles to go when it comes to that, because there are many factors that don't really let you to put forward these particular stories, especially in cinema, because cinema is a medium that really is driven so strongly by the commercial aspect. Everything has to be commercial, everything has to work. If I'm going to put a 10 rupees into it, am I going to earn $1 million out of it? That's the mentality where we are. And therefore I really, after having worked in Bollywood, again, a word I don't really associate with, but after having worked in the industry, I decided to become independent and really find my own voice in that sense, because I feel there's so much more that has to be done when it comes to authentic, honest representation, more importantly, and to be done with great deal of love. And I think that's to make my first film, to make Sisak, about this, Gaurav, I had to sell my car, I had to put my apartment on rent, I had to move back with my parents. And I didn't do it because I wanted to be this really cool filmmaker sitting here on the panel talking about this. I did it because I know that there would be a 4-year-old Faraz somewhere in the corners of the world really trying to think, is he the only Faraz in the world who feels this way? I wanted to create something for that Faraz, that 4-year-old Faraz, really trying to piece it all together. And I did it for that Faraz. So I think it's been a journey and then some. But I'm glad that we are moving towards a place of more wholesome, organic, progressive content, and hopefully that's going to open up larger, hearts across the world, and bring in more acceptance, open dialogues about really what it is to be an ally, what it is to be a good parent, what it is to be a good child, or just anyone really. I mean, I think we need to talk more about kindness. We need to talk more about love, because we as a generation, we've really forgotten how to love each other. We've forgotten how to be kind to each other, and I think that is such a sad thing, sad place to be at. So I think with cinema being such a powerful tool, I think I use it very often to bring love back, to to bring kindness back into uh, a larger dialogue that people can sort of take back home. You take back home love, you take back home kindness, and hopefully that will bring in some sort of healing to our universe and to all of us.
Faiza, would you like to take that? Would you like to take that question?
Sure. I wanted to say that, for me, I grew up in the UK, and at a time in the 70s and 80s, I was a teenager in the 80s. And I was always looking for a figure, queer heroes that I could relate to, or that I could find myself with or in. And yeah, for me, I definitely had more access to be able to see different people who later came out, famous people, or people who were breaking the boundaries. I'll give an example. My hero through my teenage years was Grace Jones, because she's just fucking out there, like, and gender bender, I think I used to call her in the 70s, or she was so challenging in her attitude, and a real role model for me in terms of her gender and breaking all the stereotypes. And we had tennis players who were very famous in the 70s, 80s, like Navratilova, who came out as being a lesbian. And so I just had a few people that at least I could, even though I couldn't relate to them because they weren't brown. One was white and one was African American. I mean, well, Jamaican actually. But anyway, I couldn't relate to it as being an Indian girl, and that obviously took a lot more years. But at least I had that kind of, I could see some queer narrative in my universe whilst I was coming out, and so it was a little bit different to Faraz's experience, of feeling maybe alone and the only one. I definitely didn't feel alone or the only one. Um, in terms of my work, I, I, for me, it wasn't really about being queer. It's just about being me. And sometimes I think too much flag waving, and making it the be all and end all, and the only identity you have is also very limiting. So for me, I try to bring who I am into, I don't want to use mainstream, but let's say into the universe. And there are a lot of people who maybe have never experienced somebody like me, be that the person that I am or my queerness. I don't always want to label it as me having to convince the world that it's okay for me to be queer, and it's okay for them to be queer, and it's okay for everyone to be queer. But by existing and just bringing myself out into the universe in all aspects of my life, my personal life, my work life, my, and everything that I do, without it being I'm here on a message to force you all to be queer too, is it's not my thing. But I want to include everybody. So even when I've done queer events, they've been absolutely open to everybody who is not queer, but are friends of the queer community or curious about the queer community.
Just to kind of add to that, like if you've kind of seen the representation, especially in the music DJing scene, change over the years when it comes to queer folks, like how have you seen that sort of change?
I've only seen that mainly with a lot of queer performances. So I would say there's a lot of queer performances and singers and queer art, and like a lot of drag queens, and I've seen that definitely expand and definitely get bigger. But I don't see, I'm sorry, I don't see, loads of gay men or trans men, trans women, lesbians becoming DJs.
And for us, I know for a fact you've told me also in part that you kind of make sure that that whole queer narrative is there part of your process. Like either they're behind the camera in your teams or somewhere, and of course you're there, but there are multiple other people also involved. So like how is it for you, and like how are the other projects that if you're not directly related to, have you seen any sort of change in that sense with respect to
Um,
representation?
yeah, I think I would. I mean, I wouldn't want to comment on what others do, but I think when it comes to me and the projects that I work on, I think I'm very particular of not just representation in front of it, Gaurav, but also behind the camera, because I feel regardless whether you are telling a story with the queer characters or not, I think it just helps to have equal representation behind the camera as well. Because I think when we talk about equality, it's especially, and I think having been denied many opportunities for being very open about my sexuality and my gender identity, not getting those big projects because they're like, but you're queer, we don't know if you'll be able to do it. And I'm like, what? I just like won 59 international awards, what are you talking about? But I think they just feel uncomfortable when I think when you really are very comfortable with yourself, it kind of makes them a little uncomfortable, especially when the industry is so toxic masculine, right? So I think I always make efforts. In fact, even in Sheer Korma, my new film, 95% of my crew was women, and not just women, but also out of those women. Part of it was also absolute queer people, who identify on the queer spectrum. So it wasn't something. It was something that I wanted to make sure that my team is very sort of cognizant of the fact that we are getting queer people involved, not just in front but also behind. I just feel more comfortable when I'm surrounded by women. They are absolutely. I would I feel that I feel more of myself when I'm with them, and I feel more creatively inclined, by their energies around. And I think that energy also reflects in what you're trying to do. So I think that happens by default. So I think one needs to just be aware, and I think talk about it more. I'm always someone who keeps talking about equal representation behind the camera as well. And I've been always flagged by a lot of people saying, but why can I not do it? And I'm like, no, you cannot do it because I am a queer person and I've been denied opportunities, constantly for being queer. So I think when a queer narrative is out there happening, please let me have that opportunity. Don't take that away from me just because you're cishet. So I keep saying this, move cis. I take that to be some of my responsibility as a queer person to be able to create more opportunities for queer people. So I think, yeah.
I, I agree with you there. I mean, I just want to, I think everything you said there, Faraz, is totally spot on. I mean, if I do a queer event, I want queer printers, I want queer security, I want queer bar people, I want to buy my drinks from a queer off license, I want everything queer, every single thing. If I'm going to do that, then that has to represent. We have to give the community money. We have to make sure that they have equal opportunities. I couldn't agree more with you. And I'm constantly horrified how many queer organizations are there and they rely on the straight community for most of their work. And they won't consciously go out and get queer rickshaw drivers because there must be and there are. And but you need to go and do that and find that. And I really, if I do anything and it's queer, it must contain as many. And I agree, if you can't get queer, then queer allies, it has to be. Otherwise, no, it's just not possible. And it has to be. That's where the game changes. That's where we become more equal when we have money and we have great jobs and we have positions of power and where we can make our voices heard, where we can be heroes for other people, where we have a strength in numbers and we're not hidden away, and where our art and our creativity is appreciated. And nothing changes until it becomes more equal. And the only way to become more equal is to include as many people from your community as possible.
So we kind of, I just wanted to move towards the conversation of safe spaces. to understand, first of all, to kind of understand what a safe space means to you, to you both, and also then kind of to understand what are certain safe spaces that you've seen around you, and how do you kind of go about creating safe spaces around you. So it's a bit of a tongue twister, but yeah, please, please go ahead.
Faraz, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for it. Okay, so
Great.
um, what is a safe space? I think a safe space really is where you can just be who you are, right? Just be yourself, and without any inhibitions, without feeling out of place, without feeling you're being judged for who you are, where you are treated equally and with great care, and with also, I think, with great love. I think where you are embraced really for who you are. I think that is a safe space for me. I don't really know a lot of safe spaces in India, except probably, when we were doing workshops for transaction at the Lalit, with the Keshav Suri Foundation. That was one place where we created a really safe space for everyone to. I don't know if you remember, Gaurav, but there was this one individual. They identify as a trans woman now, but when they walked in, they were in a total different identity. And 2 days into the workshop, they decided to show up with a sari in their bag, and they went to the washroom and they put a sari on, and then they showed up for the workshop, and I was living for that, right? I was living for that sort of representation, and that is a safe space, that to be able to just go for it, just be yourself, to be in that space, to be in such a vulnerable spot for who you are. I think we all need to work together more to be able to create more safe spaces, to make this world more safer. And I think that will only happen when we start speaking more, we start opening up more, we really take giant steps to be able to incorporate love, and to incorporate freedom in all that we do. And I think only then will we be able to create something which is not very fragile but can stand the test of time in that sense.
I also feel that creating safe spaces is really important, and that's just not for queer people, but that's for everybody across the board. Safe spaces for children, safe spaces for women. There seems to be you know reasons for us not to be equal or together, and we need to move beyond that in considerable many different directions, not just one direction. So, I also think a safe space is somewhere where you can just literally be yourself. And just as your example, Faraz, showed, like being able to change who you are and express yourself differently, or to feel the strength to express yourself in a new way, even the next day, you should be able to do that. Um, I think we've got a long way to go, as Farah said, and I think yes, we all have a duty to try and create those spaces.
Gaurav,
Faraz, you,
I just want to add to Ma Faiza's point, and I feel
yes.
it's such a beautiful thing what you said, because it reminds me of something very important that I also feel is essential, and I got a taste of it when I was traveling through Canada with my film. It's education, really. That's where you create a safe space. That's where you inculcate the idea of a safe space, something that we don't really do, because we don't talk about, I mean, we've all been to schools, but we've never been taught about genders, we've never been taught about sexuality at all. And I think it's so imperative to be able to create conversations about safe spaces right at the onset, when you start educating a child, and not just at school but also at home. I think if you're going to have a child, please, like, make sure that you're bringing up your child in the right way, because I think that's where it really begins the formation of what a safe space really is. If a child feels safe at home, I think that will start representing in the world around us, because then the child would want to create a safe space, a safer world for everyone around.
There is a conversation of safe spaces across, and I just wanted to say that when you think of safe spaces, please just don't only think about cis gay men. Think of trans women, think of lesbian folks, think of other identities, and whether whether it's okay to create safe spaces together for everybody, or like you need specific LGBT spaces and things like that. I mean,
I think when we say everyone's welcome, we really need to believe in that as well. I think that's everyone is
Across the
welcome here
board.
across the
Yeah,
board, no matter who
yeah,
you are,
yeah,
how you identify,
yeah,
what you do, how much,
yeah,
how much money you have in your
yeah,
wallet. None of that matters.
yeah,
Everyone's
yeah,
welcome. I've seen these
yeah.
boards outside American homes, says everyone's welcome, written in different languages and all of that. And I think that's something that we need to practice. Way more often than we do otherwise, and also inculcate that, and push others to also kind of get to a point to do it themselves.
Thank you for sharing that. Faraz, Faiza, thank you so much for coming on board. And I also want to thank the JioSaavn team for letting us occupy this space, because these conversations and these spaces really matter, and who are occupying them is also something that really, really matters. So thank you for letting us in your space. And we hope that this continues happening beyond the Pride Month, and it's something that actually translates into meaningful, actionable change that we're all here for. So, with that, I'd like to thank all of you for being part of this.